Joe, tell a little bit about your actual fight career. Like, when did it start, and how that all went? A little bit of the history of that, and some of the people you may have fought. How'd that work out?
Well, the start was as I was a green belt. I had trained with Kim Dashik and Bobby Dye here in Atlanta. We were in Tang Soo Do system, but it had an interesting first cousin because my instructor had also been a classmate of Masoyama. So we got to learn Basai not only in the Tang Soo Do and the Taekwondo world, but also in the Masoyama world. So we had some mixture things going on in the training. My first tournament was as a green belt, and that's where I realized I was really going to love this competition thing. So I ended up winning the Georgia and the Alabama brown belt titles. In those days, as you know, there weren't tournaments, every weekend like there are now, and there weren't a multitude of titles to be had. So there was one Georgia championship, one Alabama championship each year, and I won those. And then when I earned my black belt, I won a Southeast U.S. championship. Then I won 3 U.S. titles in various places. And I was one of the first guys that really started traveling out of the South to compete nationally. First time I went out of the state to fight, I went up into Madison Square Garden because I was in the Korean the Korean group, and so Henry Cho's tournament was up there. I never did extremely well in Henry Cho's tournament. I wasn't a golden boy.
What were the rules like on the
era.
Henry Cho? Was it like Jun Rhee and the whole Jun Rhee system at that time?
Yeah, Jun Rhee, Henry Cho, Ki Wang Kim, Richard Chun, many of the people from the Philadelphia area, and mostly, New England, but really big group of Koreans in that area. I never did compete in Jun Rhee's tournament. I did compete in Ki Wang Kim's tournament there in Washington, D.C., and I fought in Richard Chun's Tournament of Champions up in New York. I did well in that. I ended up second to Joe Hayes, who was Richard Chun's #1 student up there. Really good competitor. But Mitchell Bobrow was competing at the time in Ki Wang Kim's group. I met Jeff Smith, actually, and Pat Worley there in that Madison Square Garden event one year. That's when I first met them. They had by that time gone up to Washington, D.C. and were with Jun Rhee at the time. Then I went out to Texas a few times and fought. They had just had the big bloodbath article in Black Belt magazine about Texas, so they were really squirrely about people hitting each other. But the guy I fought in Dallas was a very aggressive guy, so I hit him too hard and got disqualified.
Now, you're talking about the Fred Wren and Jim Harrison fight, is that correct?
It could have been.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was tied to, but they just called him a bloodbath, and it was as though it was the whole tournament. And I hadn't been out there to experience any of that until I went out at the tail end of it. In our Southeast Karate Association, we had actually implemented a rule which said if the person was running in at you, you could hit him as hard as you wanted to in the face, and you would get the point for it.
Well, they had that rule here.
Yeah.
He ran into it. That's what we used to always hear. Oh, he ran into it. Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, well, and they would say that, but still they would say, well, but if there's blood, we're going to disqualify you. We just said no matter what happened, if you ran into it, it was your fault. And we found our injuries went down. So Black Belt Magazine actually did a cover story on that saying to hit or not to hit. And we had the stats that would show that when people actually took responsibility for their own safety, the injuries went down as opposed to turning it over to the other person who was supposed to control it. And I never did make it to the internationals. I did go to a tournament out in Albuquerque, got disqualified out there as well. They had the no-hit rule. And I ended up getting disqualified a good bit in the New York area, in one of Richard Chun's tournament, in Albuquerque, in Texas, and in Tennessee. I got disqualified. Jun Rhee was kind enough to give me one of the first pieces of safety gear that he put together, the round ones.
The club.
And and I fought in a tournament in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and I was the only guy that had it because he had only given them to about 10 people at the time. And I knocked one guy out down there, and I just stood over him and said,
"But
come
he didn't
on,
bleed.
And you can't be hurt with something like this."
Oh yeah.
And they actually gave me a point for that one because they didn't know any better.
Right. Well, that's still the way here in Texas, even today. I mean, if you cut them, then and they bleed, then you're disqualified. That's even in black belt division. But if you knock them out and they're not cut, then wake up. You still got to fight. Give him a minute rest.
Yeah.
So that's still going on today.
Yeah, so I wasn't always first place, but I always liked to leave, with the guy I fought, at least respecting the fact that I could hit hard if I put my mind to it.
Right.
And then 1973, I had a back injury that I suffered with from 70 to 73, and then in a match against Glenn Keeney up in Ohio, I realized that my back just hurt too much and I wasn't going to be able to compete anymore like that. So I found out what was wrong with it, and in December of 73 I had my lower back fused, where they pulled my hip joint off, took some bone off the hip, fused it to the sacrum, L3, L4.
Man, that's major.
Or maybe it was sacrum, L4, L5. And then I then started competing to fight a full contact fight against the kid I knocked out in Albuquerque, who had a big mouth, and we were going to fight a 15-round, 3-minute per round fight until one guy was either not able to continue or quit. And that never came about. But in the course of that, I started training with Mong Ji up in Ohio in Bondo. And shortly after that, Mike Anderson and Joe Lewis put together the first PKA World Championship out in Los Angeles. So I went out for that just as a guest, and I watched them fight. I'd already been doing the kickboxing and boxing in the gym, so I went ahead and challenged Bill Wallace to defend his title. And then in the following May, which made it 18 months after my back surgery, Wallace and I got in the ring here in the Omni and fought for the world middleweight title. And Bill won the fight. It was a 9-round schedule fight. Everybody had fought 3 rounds prior to that. Chuck's NBL and all that were 3-round fights. And so Bill and I fought 9 rounds. He retired undefeated, which is a euphemistic way of saying that I lost. And then I fought a few more fights in kickboxing, which were kind of anticlimactic. I got cut once because we were still wearing the safety gear, and the safety gear cut my eye.
Oh yeah, it does cut.
And but everybody that was ranked above me when Wallace and I fought got knocked out by Wallace. So by the time I retired from competition, I had by default moved up to the #1 middleweight contender position, and everybody who had been ranked above me had lost to him, so they moved down.
Right.